So ever since Spider-Man 2 has come out, people have been speculating what Spider-Man 3 and the future of this Spider-Man franchise is going to be like. I really enjoyed the game, had a ton of fun with it. Really like what they did with the characters and how they advanced their stories. But one of the biggest question marks has been that ending. And so this is going to be full spoiler territory. So if you haven't played it and you're worried about spoilers, don't listen or watch this video because I'm going to spoil things. Okay, so at the end of the game, it appears that Peter retires and that Miles kind of takes over for Peter and that he is going to be Spider-Man while Peter tries to figure out his life a little bit. And initially, this didn't really bother me, that I was just like, oh yeah, he's gonna retire and take it easy for a little bit, and then they'll probably have Miles Morales 2, where you'll play as Miles training Silk, and they'll have some sort of villain. And then you have Spider-Man 3, where Green Goblin enters in, and Peter will be back as Spider-Man. But Insomniac has said some things recently that make me nervous, that as an OG Spider-Man fan, I am not loving the language that they're using, and so I kind of wanted to dive into it and share my thoughts on it, and essentially share my thoughts on this whole idea that Miles is actually now the Spider-Man in Insomniac's universe. So I want to give you some negatives and some positives as to how I see this thing playing out. And I'll try to start off with the positives and then head into the negatives, where I've got a lot more negative things to say than positive. So first off, I think Miles is a great character. I've always enjoyed his character. I was there at the very beginning when the Ultimate Comic Book swapped from Peter to Miles, and so I've been a Miles Morales fan for longer than the majority of the world. And so I've always enjoyed the character. I think he has a lot more to offer and a lot of great stories that they can use. And to see them pursue him more is exciting for me because I just think more variety, the better. And a lot of his stories are stories that people don't know or haven't read before. And so there's a lot of potential there. The second thing I like is that I really wanted a Miles 2 game. And so it seems like they're heading in that direction. And that gets me excited. I think, great, let's expand the franchise. Let's do more. Let's have this Marvel world in Insomniac grow and be bigger. And so that's great. And thirdly, I think he's got a lot of lessons to learn, and it is cool to see this whole Miles-Peter relationship. And I do at some point feel like Peter will die, and so it feels inevitable to me that Miles will take the mantle at some stage, at some point. I don't know when that is, but pretty much since they've introduced Miles, I've assumed that at some point Peter will die. So it's not really that shocking. I think that story can be done really well. And in some ways, it gets me excited to know they're still going to be using this Miles character pretty heavily. But that's about it. For the positives that I feel way more negatives. Firstly, just as a original Spider-Man fan, Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Like, I love Batman Beyond, but Bruce Wayne is still Batman. So, like, Batman Beyond is great. I really love the character. But if they were to replace Bruce Wayne with Terry McGinnis, I would feel weird about it. It's just a different vibe, especially if Bruce Wayne was still young and around and could have been Batman. It's just a very weird thing where you're like, Bruce Wayne would never quit being Batman if he could keep being Batman. That's just such a core part of his character that he would never leave. And the same thing for Peter, is I feel like his great power with great responsibility does not let him retire. It doesn't let him quit. And there are times in the comic books he's tried to, but the core part of his character is that great power comes with great responsibility, that he has power. And so he has a responsibility to save the people he loves, the people he cares about, the city he's in, that's his responsibility. That his responsibility isn't just to do his time and then retire, that Uncle Ben shaped him to such an extent that he feels this deep desire to always be Spider-Man as long as he can be Spider-Man. And for him to just retire and give the reins to Miles, even though he could keep being Spider-Man, feels unauthentic to the character and the core of the character. And I think that's why it bothers me so much. The second thing that bothers me is, as great as Miles is, he's not Peter. That I enjoy Miles as a character. I enjoyed his standalone game. I've enjoyed his comics. I enjoyed the Into the Spider-Verse movies, but he's not Peter. And to be honest, Insomniac's Miles Morales is a lot more boring of a character than, say, the Spider-Verse rendition. And yes, I read the original comic book. The original this is more in line actually with what Miles Morales as a character was actually like in the comic book. But that doesn't mean that it's better. That he just isn't as gravitating as he's actually honestly kind of boring. That I don't find his character that interesting in the game. That for them to then say, "Oh yeah, this is the Spider-Man now moving forward." I just don't get excited for that at all, to be honest. That I'm like, dang, because I really feel like you've done a great job with Peter, and Miles is still a character that I'm learning to like in this universe. That I like him based on the media I have around me, not necessarily based on what Insomniac has actually done with that character. And so to think about that just makes me nervous because I don't care. And to be honest, it makes me nervous for Spider-Man 3. Where I'm like, okay, I assume that something is going to happen where Peter's going to have to come out of retirement. But if it turns out that it's Miles fighting the Green Goblin, that will be a major disappointment. That that would feel like such a wasted opportunity because we've been building to this and building to Peter facing off with Norman and obviously Doc Ock again to some extent. And for it to be Miles instead of Peter would be weird. I still assume they're not going to do that. I assume something will happen in the third game where Peter needs to come back. Whether Doc Ock turns into Superior Spider-Man, takes over Miles' body, and so Peter has to come out of retirement to help Miles get his body back and also defeat Green Goblin. That's possible. Maybe it's just that Miles can't take on the Green Goblin alone. Something will happen that's the Spider-Man needs to come out of retirement, I assume at least. And then kind of the third thing is I just don't, and the longer I sit with the second game, the more this kind of bothers me. It was nice to be able to have both Spider-Man in the game, but I felt more and more that Spider-Man 2 should have been Peter Parker's sequel, not a mix between the two. And whenever I was Miles, I just wanted to go back to Peter. And so that's kind of the hard thing is when you're playing as a Miles Morales solo game, you're having a good time, you're stuck as Miles, you're enjoying that Peter's interacting in the universe. That's how I feel like the Spider-Man mainline game should have been, where it's still Peter's story, but Miles shows up. And I actually think the only time we should have played as Miles was when Miles and Peter fought. That should have been the only time we switched, and it would have been a cool moment where you switch to Miles and have to fight Peter. And outside of that, I wish it was more like the Miles Morales game, where Miles exists, he's in the story, he's showing up, you get to fight with him, you get to see him around New York City, but you just play solely as Peter for the majority of the game. And the more I think about it, the more I didn't like the switching back and forth, the more I didn't like sometimes Peter jobbing for Miles, where a lot of times Miles seemed to be a better Spider-Man than Peter, which is ridiculous and not accurate to the comic books, not accurate to whatever. They're both great Spider-Man, but he's way more inexperienced, especially right now. And I don't love that aspect that Miles can just be Miles and fight Venom and do whatever, but Peter needs an anti-Venom suit in order to... those parts bother me as a Spider-Man fan, and I just worry they're going to continue doing that because Miles is really trendy right now, because Into the Spider-Verse is so huge. But again, this Miles is so much more boring than the Into the Spider-Verse Miles. He's got way less personality, and I just think that as a character, he hasn't earned the right yet to take that mantle. That this character they've given me, I like a lot, and I would love him to have his own games and appear in games. But for him to replace Peter Parker as the Spider-Man in this universe, I just don't feel like he's earned that yet. That he hasn't earned that from fans. He hasn't earned that from me. He hasn't earned that in the story yet. Where his character isn't interesting enough to take this mantle fully on by himself yet. And I know that might be nitpicky and silly, and because I'm an OG Spider-Man fan, you're like, times change. And I get it. I just think that just like how Bruce Wayne had to hit a point where he could not physically be Batman anymore, that Terry McGinnis came in and earned the right of the Batman title and was a really interesting character, that this Miles hasn't done that yet. That Peter isn't at a place where he would logically and in line with his character quit being Spider-Man. That there should actually be something that happens where he literally can't be Spider-Man anymore, and Miles takes over as the Spider-Man. Until then, they should just work together and continue the mentorship and build on Miles' character. And along with that, I don't think the Miles they presented yet is that interesting of a character that I want him to be the only Spider-Man. That I still, even in the Miles game, get excited when Peter shows up. And in Spider-Man 2, I was always just waiting to switch back to Peter. And so, I don't know. I don't like this news at all. I hope that I'm right, that they just mean that for now, Miles is the Spider-Man in this universe, because obviously Peter is like semi-retiring and hanging out, but then by the third game, he will show up again and be forced out of retirement and become the Spider-Man again, and then possibly die or have something happen where he's forced to actually really retire. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts. I'm not feeling great about the news, but I want to know what you guys think. Head down in the comment section down below. Let me know your thoughts. Let's have a dialogue. Do you think that Miles taking over for Peter is a great idea? Did you buy Peter retiring at the end of the game? Or did you feel like me, where like, Peter wouldn't retire? This is really out of character. Are you looking forward to a Miles Morales 2? Do you hope that Miles is the only Spider-Man in Spider-Man 3? Or do you think Peter will come out of retirement? Do you think they're going to kill Peter? How do you feel about this news in general? Maybe you like the Miles Insomniac version way more than I do. Let me know in the comment section down below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that junk, and I will see you guys in the next one.